All right, what's up, y'all? I'm going to preface this with this will be a little bit of a different episode. This is episode 110 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. 110. Yeah, my name is Evan Strong, the founder of In the Image Clothing Company, all four sides as a whole. And the episode title is I Feel Like Myself Again. And I am just going to kind of speak out of personally, the human being who will be delivering these sayings through this podcast episode. I'm just going to kind of talk about myself, actually. As the founder of all four sides of In the Image Clothing Company, as the 25-year-old man that I am, as the person who's been through a lot of weird experiences, especially within the past couple of years, and I really do feel like myself again. Nobody's got to care, but I'll just talk about it. So we'll do the intro still, right? I'll play a little bit of guitar at the beginning and maybe even throughout. We'll talk about all four sides of the company, what they are. I'll talk about where clothing sits, and then I'll kind of talk about myself. And I don't really do that, but I'm going to. All right? So hang out if you want, right? If you want. Hang out. And yeah. And that's what I mean when I say I feel like myself again, dude. Off the well, I'll say this, and I've said it before, but off the beat and path. Not off the beaten path. But the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, I've said this somewhere documented, but I'm saying it again now. It's actually off the beat and path. It was a thing that I had that is now the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, where this all started, my actual lifelong thing, right? And it was one of those like so closes in a sense. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled So Close. And I had a place where I was placing videos and making music. And now we have a whole fourth of the company dedicated to music. And I'll talk about each fourth, but that's how I feel the most natural. And we've talked about that too, right? Living a paradoxical life as disciples of Jesus Christ. We're called a strange and peculiar people within Scripture. But yeah, this is 1/4 of us as a whole, right? If you know, you know. If not, then welcome. We're 110 episodes into this place, In the Image Clothing Company podcast. We have discussions on the gospel of Jesus Christ, aka the truth of all things. We just talk about things as they are and get down to it, man. I get blunt and bold and raw and real. It's great. We have another fourth, which is the main side of In the Image Clothing Company, where it all started. And like I said, it's actually still off the beat and path. When I sign into it in the way that I'm doing that in this current moment, right, on the earth, the 24th of April, 2025, it says, welcome, off the beat and path. But I'm signing into In the Image Clothing Company, so it's, right, it's as real as it gets. So here's the thing, though. The main side of In the Image Clothing Company, what we really do and what we were founded upon and still are rooted in, is physically, at least, right? Other than we spread the gospel in everything we do. And every side of the company is centered around Jesus Christ. But physically, we address the human body's natural function. We allow it to work. It's about the skeletal system, not the fat content which changes or the muscle mass that changes as well. Every joint within the body just has a neutral position, and it just has to be in that. And we place clothing onto us, and then the center line that we have to have, the sternum, the trachea, the spine, the nose, and our jaw stabilizing the entire body naturally, can't be in the center if clothing's imbalanced. There's feet opposing the center line, gripping arches inward to keep us vertical on an earth with gravity pulling us straight down. So we address clothing. We show free modifications. We personally will have In The Image Clothing Company clothing available, made out of 100% natural materials, because the body is, staying centered, because the body has a center line, fitting correct, because there's only certain pivot points at each joint of the body, and that's how we allow, keyword, the human body to work. We'll never train the human body to do anything that it just won't already do. It's a mechanical machine placed on a rock in space we call Earth. Yeah. Standing, sleeping, sitting, walking, eating, hydration, naturally. We discuss all these things. There's another fourth of us in the Image Clothing Company music. I don't normally play steel strings or a full-sized guitar, and this thing is both those. Okay. This guitar that I played a little bit here and might throughout this more. This is my mother's guitar, but I show sizings and setups of guitar to allow no alteration to the hands, because the hands are essentially the shoulders, as the feet are essentially the hips. Same thing. The body can only ever work as an entirety, activated all together, because it's always together. It can't separate parts of it or have parts of it deactivated and carry around dead weight and expect other parts to be able to do their job without trying to compensate, and it just can't happen. So chronic patterning, scar tissue, pain, we address those things and rid them by getting rid of any restriction to the human body, okay? So yes, another fourth of us is In The Image Clothing Company dogs. Yes, an entire fourth of our company is dedicated to dogs. Myself, Evan Strong, I will be breeding purebred standard poodles. You seriously could have the opportunity to have one of our puppies from the litters that will be coming. But our whole goal for that side of the company is letting dogs stay natural. That's the slogan. Unnatural materials and toys for dogs, any accessories, collars, leashes, harnesses, imbalanced, and potentially unnatural dehydrated foods for dogs, kibble, right? We address these things, and we will also have clothing available for dogs, quote unquote. Collars and leashes, for sure, when it comes in the Image Clothing Company, okay? With the same intent that we have behind the human being, natural, okay? Staying centered for the dog because it's on Earth as well, which pulls it straight down with gravity. And just ideally no restriction to the dogs, okay? Now, clothing for everybody has to sit in the same location. Pants have to be entirely above the hips, so there's no restriction to the pelvis. Slightly higher in the front than the rear for the angle of the waistband, because that's the only way that core muscles can work, is by shortening. Same with every muscle within the human body. Check out the main site of In The Image Clothing Company. There's a video titled Muscles Only Contract, because that's the case. The tops that we wear, they have seams on top of our shoulders, which need to sit evenly behind the bones on the peak of our shoulders. Our shoulders only ever work behind our head. And then the edge seams of our tops need to be right at the pivot of the shoulder joint. Two things we call prerequisites under In The Image Clothing Company. Conditional. There's not always ropes on our feet that we label as shoelaces. And there's not always tags within our clothing that give information. That's something that's only decades old as of today's date, which means tens of years from this point back, okay? It became a legal thing that had to be had in the areas of the earth that it does right now, okay? As of the date that I'm saying this. And only very recent past, okay? There's only one way to weave a rope across the top of the human foot and not alter the shape and functionality and structural skeletal system and workings of each joint within the functions that the human lower part does. I just wanted to keep furthering it. The feet can't be altered or the ankles. In the Image Clothing Company's shoelacing technique allows that to be the case. Okay, found wherever you find us, 5 words as a whole, in the Image Clothing Company. We tie our shoes evenly over toward the center line of the human being on both feet, okay, with the technique, because there is a center line. Secondly, all tags must be removed. They're either damaging your body or you take them out of your clothing, included within the shoes, okay? That's it, period, and done. So I mean it. Episode 110 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast. Its title, I Feel Like Myself Again. I went through a hiatus, is the word I use for it. About 13 months, give or take. You can take one away and it's maybe closer to 12, but from February 2024 to February 2025, right? I removed my records from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints voluntarily because I got into some things that I shouldn't. I wasn't in things, I just mean I got deceived. And I thought that that was the place that I didn't need to be. I thought it was a place that was no longer for me, is really the case. Okay, that's really what happened. It was my fault. And I got rebaptized. The episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled The Second Time Around. Okay, just a couple months ago. And I feel like myself again. I feel like myself again in a lot of ways. I'm going to sit here and talk about myself. It's not so common for me to do that. I was in a bad place, man. I almost moved to California. Currently and always until today's date, I live in the state of Utah, the United States of America. And the state of California was where I was headed. I didn't end up going. And then I found it in the Image Clothing Company. About a month or two after. I guess it was like 3 months because it was July in 2024. I was planning to get on an airplane and head to LAX airport. And then September 23rd, 2024, we actually launched in the Image Clothing Company. We meaning me. Okay. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew I needed to. So that's what? July, August, September, yeah. Right around 3 months after I didn't do what I thought was going to happen. Another thing that I didn't think was going to happen is getting rebaptized into the church that I was born into, the covenant of. Spent my entire life in until I was 24. And I thought I had made this big old grand decision to go spread my wings on my own. Whatever that could mean, right? I was just so wrong. So then a few months after founding In the Image Clothing Company, I got rebaptized. Now a couple months after that, here we are. I feel like myself again in many ways. My body used to be working within imbalances because my shoes were tied toward the same direction when there's a center line to the human being until I was 24 years old. And now, after tying my shoes evenly over toward the inside, which is just a rope across the top of the human feet, placing an artificial man-made thing on it we call a shoe. And my right side was tied incorrect for 24 years of my life. And now since then, up until today's date, year and a half, almost 2 years probably of tying shoes evenly now, my body has been going through a lot of adjustment. Scar tissue that built up over 20-something years has had to be released. Insertions of muscles have had to adjust to actually be able to now track in their only working position after trying so hard to track in positions they never could. For 2 decades of my personal life, Evan Strong. I was wearing oversized clothing for most of my life, especially at least most of my life. And I started wearing clothing that's actually my size. And then that in itself caused a lot of things to go back to their only working position within my human flesh. Scar tissue has been having to release. Muscles have been working so differently. Joints have been actually able to operate. Rotations have been able to happen within especially my right side, as I'm saying, and as is the case for every human on the earth, because what we talk about. The right-handed world. A video under the main site of In The Image Clothing Company. That's its title. And that's the case. Clothing designs themselves are right-handed. And also products that get made for people to use are geared toward 85% of the population in modern day because they are right-handed. And we're in imbalances as human beings, and I'm not anymore. At least, so much less so. I feel like myself again. I've had tags within my clothing for my whole life, if they've been there, until I've been intentional to remove every single tag that could possibly be within my clothing, at least since founding In The Image Clothing Company on the 23rd of September, 2024. My body's been able to just do what God designed it to, and it couldn't even be allowed to until I was 24 years old. I'm going to activities again within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I'm involving myself, which has to happen, in order to actually be fulfilled. It's one thing to just claim to be a member of something, and it's another thing to actually be an active participant in furthering the kingdom of God on the earth today. I feel like I can actually speak again because my trachea, now able to be in an inline position, and my jaw, now so much more centered than it ever had been, at least since I started getting into any imbalance, even being a baby and having clothing placed onto me. I couldn't speak there for a while, and a lot of it was like the father of John the Baptist, Zechariah, who couldn't speak because he was struck dumb. Until John the Baptist was born, and then the tongue of his father, Zechariah, was loosed. In many ways, that's what was going on with me, because I did something evil, terrible, and that was entirely my fault by removing my records voluntarily from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But also having the entire right side of my body be able to have its internal rotation back and get closer to its own center line where the most strength of the human being is. The muscles that go up into my jaw, as every human being on the earth will deal with in the cases of what we do under In The Image Clothing Company, quote unquote, keyword, allowing the human body to work. That's what we do, okay? And we do it through clothing, and we do the things that apply to all the beings that are humans. That's how I say it, because it's the truth. Man, woman, tall, short, skinny, fat, any age, any part of the earth, any time period to ever be. The body only works one way. Clothing designs are all doing the same thing to the human being if there's imbalances in them. Every human across the entirety of the earth, forever. And I've gone before, as far as I've been the one who's practiced what I am now preaching. Okay? The episode of In The Image Clothing Company podcast, preaching what I have practiced on the back end. And all this scar tissue that gets built up on the right side of the trachea of the human being because of things like In The Image Clothing Company's dreaded collar seam modification. If that's not done, and there's a collar seam within anything that we place around our neck, it's just not allowing the collar to stay centered any time period to ever be, every human being to ever live. There's a spine there, and there's upper trapezius muscles, and there's a trachea that you can't breathe without oxygen going through every single breath. And it needs to stay centered because it's in the center, mechanically, physiologically, anatomy-wise of the human being, okay? So is the nose and the mouth, the inlets for oxygen to then go through the tube of the trachea. And there's so much scar tissue that gets built up here on the right side. And there's muscles that connect from the jaw and come down here, right next to the trachea, into some of these upper first ribs, collarbone area. There's only one neutral location for the collarbones to sit. And when shoulder seams are imbalanced, collars as well. And everything stemming from the feet coming up and the tips of the hands coming up. I couldn't speak because there was a lot of pain on the right side of my trachea here from scar tissue, trying to keep my trachea in its only center line when my body was being pulled out on the right from clothing. Every human to ever live potentially suffers with the exact same problems as every other one of them when clothing is placed onto them. My nose has had so much scar tissue built up on the right side of it for the same reasons. My jaw has been entirely imbalanced. There's an episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast titled The Root Canal Story, and when I was 13, it was honestly and entirely my fault. I was cussing some kids out at a trampoline park indoor. And what happened is I did a front flip 360, which I could do at the time, but my knee came up and hit me in the front left tooth, killed the root, and I had to get a root canal. And when the dentist was done with the root canal, there was so much excess filling material on the rear of my front tooth that my jaw has been out of alignment since I was 13 years old, and I'm currently 25. And my teeth were nowhere near meshing. And through that, I went through braces, right? Those metal things placed onto the teeth to try to align the bite when I was 16 years old. I had them on there for 2 years, right around that time. And I remember the orthodontist one time saying, "You've got a lot of excess filling material on your tooth here on your front left one. Do you want this to be shaved down so you can bite smoother?" And I was like, "No, it's okay." And I've been suffering breathing pattern discrepancies, jaw pain. The entirety of my skull and all the way down to my feet and tips of my fingers have been altered because of that. And, well, we'll say this because it's the truth. As of this moment that I'm speaking, my bite mesh is better than it has since I was 13. Even after getting braces at somewhere around 16 years old. And having all my teeth visually look aligned, but my jaw be off through that time. I feel like myself again in a lot of ways. I can speak audibly clearer than I ever could in the past as far as articulating words. And I went many years of my life doing stuff like this. And I'm gonna kind of hit it a little bit, dude. I'm gonna sit a little bit more centered, and I'm gonna beatbox a little bit. I haven't beatboxed in a bit, brother. I've been going through so much jaw pain. As my body, from my very foundation at my feet, has been allowed to be more centered, everything from there up to the tip of my head and the tips of my fingers has had to adjust as well. And from the edges of my shoulders, having shirts that now fit after the majority of my life wearing oversized clothing, That's had to adjust as well. Removing tags from clothing when I probably always had a tag in at least something I was wearing every single second that I had clothing on through my lifetime, because that's just how it's been in designs at this time period, coming from the factory with tags in them. My pants are now above my hips. The only way that they can ever actually not restrict the body, and that hadn't been the case until it did, right? Last year in 2024 is when that started for my personal life, Evan Strong. And so there's a lot that's happened. Yeah. Tying drawstrings, right? Uneven rather than now the slipped lap knot, LAPP, allowing the knot that goes around the circumference of our pelvis. Really, it's, that lower back because it's above the hips. The only way that it cannot restrict the human being. Now, there's not rotations happening to my pelvis from a rope that I'm placing around my body. And there was for many, many years. There's a lot, man, that I'm doing, and everything that I show to do under In The Image Clothing Company, I do. Because that's how I know to do it. And also, I'm not a hypocrite. Except for the times that I am, right? Because I'm sinful by nature. So, I feel like myself again. I'm playing guitar fluently again. You heard that intro, brother. I don't care what you thought about it, but you heard it. If you did. I now know my path. Breeding purebred standard poodles. Giving truth to the entire earth and every human being to ever live on it about the only way that clothing can be placed onto a human being and not alter its physical operation. Sitting here and giving discussions on our God, the one and only one that is actually there. And I call this In The Image Clothing Company Podcast. I know my path now. I know what I'm doing. And I didn't decide it. It just kind of dropped in my lap. And you can think whatever you want about that. But I'm sitting here doing what I said I was going to do at the intro of this episode, and I'm talking about myself. And that's what's happened. I didn't plan this, dude. Did not plan to be breeding dogs. Did not plan to even ever really be intentional so much about something like anything when it comes to clothing. Because I would intentionally ask for clothing that was oversized for birthday and Christmas presents. When people would say, hey, I'll get you something for your birthday or for Christmas, what would you like? I'd say an extra large, whatever, as far as a top goes. And my size is medium. And those were years back when I was in my teenage life. And now I'm 25 years old, so only potentially larger. And no, not size large, not size XL. Extra large is what that's also known as. No, I'm a medium, dude. And I don't even know if I wore mediums when I was 13 years old. And in fact, I know that I didn't, because I was in junior high school at 12, 13, 14 years old, those 3 years, wearing larges or extra larges. So I'm sitting here talking about myself because I feel like myself again. The only way we can actually feel like ourselves is if we are allowing ourselves, I almost said bodies, but it's not just about the physical body, it's about all that we are as a human being, but we're nothing human being-wise without a physical body. That's what makes you be able to even say that you are a human being. Otherwise, you're a spirit child of God, and you still are, but we're placed into a physical body, and that's how we're on this earth. Otherwise, you're not on this earth, right? Having a body of flesh and bone, being able to be affected by the laws of gravity. Okay? And I feel like myself again. I know God, and I read His Word, and I know His Word intellectually more than I ever have in this earthly life of mine up until now. I'm proud in a proper way, not a prideful way, but in a grateful way, if you will, in a not ashamed by any means, and exactly the opposite end of that. I want to shout it from the rooftop and the top of the mountain that I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And in high school, for example, junior high school, I'd shy away from it. When I was 22 and I worked at a little cafe, I got asked if I was religious, and I remember I said, well, yeah, I mean, I'm Christian, but I believe in a lot of things. And what I was is a member of the one and only true restored gospel in its fullness. Gospel means good news, by the way, in English. I was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at that time, 22 years old. And I was telling people, well, yeah, I mean, yeah, but I believe in a lot of things. And now, even just this week and this current moment, I'll say it again, but many, many episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, I've said I don't believe in anything because I don't. I know God. I know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is the true church. I also know that in this give or take year time period where I wasn't a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, I was telling others how it was a church of scripts and people didn't know it, but they'd stand up there and know what words to say on the pulpit. And that's the case, but not for everybody. And I know it now in a way that I didn't before. I feel like myself again. I feel like I could take anything on and lose. Because I don't care to win. I don't care to be right. I care about Jesus Christ more than anything ever. I know that I used to think I cared about things and I didn't. The very things that I said that I cared so much about were dragging me to hell. And I was feeding into it. You know, I know that there was a time, probably around 22 years old as well, where I would be drinking drinks that were not supposed to, were commanded not to, under the word of wisdom, which is really just like words of a wise person, right? Things can alter your body. And I was drinking not even alcoholic beverages, but teas, black tea, and so much of it because we were commanded not to. And I was in this defiant state of like, oh, I'll show you God. And you know what God showed me is depression. My fault. Sit on that for a second. I feel like myself again. I don't get sick. I eat so little amounts of food. I never get sore. I never stretch, never warm up. I don't do anything to quote unquote exercise. That's not just what I would naturally do. I feel like myself again. And the way that I feel like myself again is because it's funny because I knew what I was going to say and then it didn't even come out. I was trying to be something for so many years. I was trying to find something. I was meditating and I was listening to podcasts from other human beings. You know, I was working jobs where I was working with chemicals. I was wearing boots that had an inch heel on them for years. I was cleaning a locker room floor when I was 17 every night in a couple inches of, locker room floor water, which is human feces and urine and chemicals, chlorine from the pool, and anything else that could have been on that floor. It was soaking into my leather boots. I was breathing it in because it was hot and humid in there. And then wearing the same 2 work uniforms every day and rarely washing them for the year and a half that I worked there. You know what I do know is what it's like to not be myself. Yeah. I know what it's like to please my dad because I thought that was going to help something. And really, I was just trying to help him. And I know what it's like to now not be doing that. I know what it's like to have every opinion not matter. And actually, on the end that I'm saying that is the end that I'm currently sitting in, saying that I feel like myself again. Because I remember times in my life wanting my opinions to matter so much. And those were some of those things that I referenced as things dragging me to hell. Because there's only truth. And I know what comes from that phrase that I told my coworkers at the cafe when I was 22. That I believe in a lot of things. I know it comes from believing things. Believing my earthly dad, right? Who tried to get me to believe that he was always right. And he was very often wrong and would never admit it. He tried to get me to believe that he was perfect, and in times I did. He told me who I was, and I believed it for years. What I was worth and capable of, what I would amount to, and what I never could, according to his words. I believed it. And now I don't believe in anything. And I know God. I feel like myself again. I haven't had my own vehicle in right around a year. And since I was 16, I have always had my own vehicle. And I had always placed so much importance on that when I did. As if I almost couldn't live without it. And now I'm more content in those ways than I have ever been. I feel like myself again. I spent years of my life mountain biking. And I was in beautiful places. The state of Utah. Actually in the mountains. We've got big ones. Trees and deer. All sorts of animals. Wildlife of any kind. Nature. Smelled good. God's country, if you will. But I'd be riding my bike so fast that I wouldn't even take it in. And not only that, but I'd have little things placed into my ear canals, altering my jaw's only working position, while wearing a helmet that was imbalanced, having a root canal with all that filling there, choking, suffocating, shoes laced and tied unevenly and incorrect, tags in clothing, oversized clothing, a stretchy belt around my waist, almost always biking in jeans, and all that jeans do that we talk about under In The Image Clothing Company. And sure, I was in the mountains, but I didn't even know it. Because really what I was in was the beats in my ears from the music that was very worldly, sinful, terrible, evil messages that I was clinging to, relating so hard, and yes, to people who are living in hell. And I was denying God. I was looking at him in the face. I mean, I'm out there in the mountains, in his creation, and he is the great I am. That is God. And I placed a man-made, satanic tune in my head. Right? And there are some good messages in the music as well. Isn't that a paradox? I feel like myself again because now I walk. And I was thinking last night, I really want to make it clear for any viewers of In The Image Clothing Company that me, Evan Strong, as the founder, I mean it. I walk somewhere between 20 and 60 miles a day, often. Almost every day. In the warmer months of the year, as of current and last year as well. More so now than last year, but last year, somewhere around 12 and a half miles at least. Every day for months in the warm months. And speaking out of literally the past couple weeks, I've gone on 20-mile walks, 40-mile walks, somewhere between 40 and 60 miles, easy, daily. And I don't take anything with me besides the clothing that I'm just wearing that doesn't restrict my body. I'm not listening to some music as I do it. My thoughts aren't on these things that I could and might and wish and hope for, because I don't hope for anything. I have faith in God, because whether I believe he's there or not, he still is. And whether I can muster up any hope to have, right, he's still there, and I can have faith that no matter if I believe it or not, or care, or hope, or want, or wish, or anything, it's not about me. But now I can walk and I can take things in. I couldn't walk in the past. It wasn't fast-paced enough for my worldly state of being. Right? 98 BPM. Right? I don't know how many beats per minute that was, but I listened to a lot of rap music, man, back then. I made a lot of rap music. And now I sit in silence. And I prefer it. I feel like myself again. I make music. And it's not quite how it was when I was making it as a late teenager into my early 20s. It's changed a lot because I've changed a lot. Only back to who I am. I feel like myself again. Yep. I used to do so many things that weren't authentic to me, and I didn't know it. Yeah. I really do feel like myself again. I feel like myself. I used to spend time with people often, and now I'm almost always alone, and I love it. I never allowed myself to be alone when I was alone back in these times because, I wasn't really alone when I was blasting somebody else's voice into my head through the music that I was always playing. Yeah, I haven't had any type of media for right around 3 years. Yeah. And I was so lost in that for 10 years at least. Oh, just about exactly 10 years. I don't listen to music anymore. Just hasn't been the case as of now. As of the past year. I feel like myself, dude. I feel like myself because I don't have anything not allowing me to be that. I feel like myself because I stopped pleasing men. I was always just pleasing people, man. I don't laugh at things anymore that's not funny to me. I turn my nose up at stuff and I let people know I'm not having it when I'm not having it. I keep my mouth shut when somebody asks me a question that I don't need to answer. I please God. I stopped saying stuff so much. I used to always just have to put in some kind of input. If I knew the answer, I'd say it. And now I don't even care, dude. There's so much I don't care about. And that makes life pretty darn clear. I used to care about everything, especially the things I didn't care about. So, anyway. I'm so excited for the dogs. Yeah. There was a lot that I just shut off as an option as a kid because my dad told me I could never deserve. And I wanted a dog so bad when I was a little kid. And my dad always just said it's an absolute no. All right, cool, right? That's his choice when I'm just a kid. But I believed that I couldn't have a dog. And guess what? Now I don't believe anything. But I know God. You know, I know that it's okay to feel guilty and sad. And I know that it's okay to get snappy. And I do it. And I know that God has forgiven me for every mistake that I haven't even made yet. I feel like myself again, brother. So stick around for the dogs. I've always loved animals. When I was a kid, my mom would have my room all decorated with moose, elk, deer, bear. If you've heard past episodes of In the Image Clothing Company podcast where I've talked about brown bear, I love them so much. I always thought it would be awesome to work with animals, and now that's what I'm going to be doing. Yeah, I feel like myself because when I was a teenager and into my 20s, I always said the phrase, I'm in love with movement. Fanboying over martial artists, Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan. Even just fight scenes in movies for the sake of how people could just move their body, man. And there was times in my life where I was laying in a hospital bed with my entire sternum cut open. And through all my years of doing parkour and flips outside, I wasn't so mobile. And now my body moves very, very well and operates how God designed it to. I remember when I was 18 years old, I had a lot of pain in my knees, and I've talked about the story. I went to an orthopedic surgeon because I didn't really know what else to do, and also I asked my dad, and he kind of said to do that. I'm not saying that was definitively his decision as far as how that played out, but I remember coming back to him after going to the orthopedic surgeon because I lived with my dad, and I was in tears just bawling about it because I was in so much physical pain. I couldn't even sit down into a chair or stand back up without using my arms as much as I could because of the pain in my knees. And I was told that I needed surgery. And no, it's just not true. But I didn't know any better at the time. And I just thought about my kids. And that was where my mind went first, is reaching down to tie my kids' shoes. And how's that going to even be the case if I can't even sit down into a chair because my knees were hurting so bad at the time? And now I'm thinking about the dogs. My kids as well, but I've known, since founding In The Image Clothing Company and, rating my knee pain, now I can sit in a deep low squat entirely comfortable for however many minutes I need to. My heels flat on the earth and my glutes flat on my heels. But not only my kids, I'm now thinking about my dogs. We're going to have litters of puppies. And there's a lot that comes with that because they're close to the earth. And now I can get down there without pain. I feel like myself again. Yeah. Really the way that I've been allowed to feel like myself again, and I tried to say it earlier and the words didn't come out. I said this at my baptism. Those are my shoulders popping right then, by the way. That wasn't me out of nervousness. I want to address it just because I know sometimes people pop out of nervousness. I'm not nervous to say this. I'm so grateful to be able to. When I got baptized the second time in February this year, right, the second time around, as I referenced the podcast episode of In the Image Clothing Company podcast where I documented it. I'm pretty sure it was the day after it happened when I documented that episode. I said it within there. I gave context on when it was. I told people sitting there who attended my baptism, which I only invited one person. That's a really good friend of mine. Everybody else who showed up was just people from the stake and the ward, right? Within the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, people who go to the same building that I've seen there and who knew that I was getting baptized that day. It's kind of a last minute thrown together thing, and I loved that. But I told people there, I now can very strongly testify about the gift of repentance because I had made so many mistakes up until that point. And it's crazy that I have been allowed to be forgiven for them by God when He's the one that I had wronged in those mistakes that I made time and time again. The same mistake for many times and many mistakes many times over. And that's really how I've been allowed to feel like myself again. And I was thinking about this yesterday and today. I preach the gospel, and I do it. That's the whole point of this fourth of the company in the Image Clothing Company podcast. I talk about God as He is, and the way that I know how that is because He says who He is, and He is who He says He is. We all read the same books of Scripture. I talk about the Book of Mormon and the Holy Bible, any doctrine and true text that is about Jesus Christ Himself, our God. And it's His word. And I was realizing I don't really talk about repentance so much. Episode 3 of In the Image Clothing Company podcast was titled Repentance. And it gets talked about on here. Up until now it has been. But if people don't really know the gospel, then maybe they don't really know so much about repentance and what it really is. And it's just a simple, I'm sorry, with sincerity. And that's really how I've been allowed to feel like myself again, is by repenting for things that may seem silly to others, but to me it was a backhanded slap in the face to my Creator. And it's the things that I have discussed within here are some of the big ones. Something that, like I said, could be very silly to some. Drinking black tea. But I knew that it was wrong, and we are held accountable for what we know. And that's why I was doing it. I'll show you God. Yeah, I showed Him. I showed Him how evil I could be in that moment. And He let me know. Yeah, and I'm still sinning today, right? And every day for the rest of my life. Because I'm a imperfect, sinful by nature human being. But I now know what repentance really is and what it means to actually be repentant. and I now feel like myself again. And I'm now doing all that I can in this current moment, speaking for this time period and out of personal experience, and talking about myself, because I do feel like myself again. I'm doing all I can, man, to follow God, the Good Shepherd, because I'm a lost sheep. I feel like myself, though, brother. I was walking home tonight. We played the sport called pickleball just over here in an outside court. And when I was walking home from it, it was dark outside. And not only just while I was walking home, but while I was playing pickleball as well. And it's just been that way for the past quite a few weeks. I was just thinking about walking home with my dog. And I was saying, and praying to God, this is how every night's going to be, is just coming home to take care of the dogs. I feel like myself, brother. So much. And I never even knew who that guy was, man. So thank you. We will have clothing available in the Image Clothing Company clothing when it comes. If you want to purchase it, just get it in your size. Oversized clothing is an imbalance and a very damaging one. Collars and leashes available, and all the things that we will be having available product-wise for dogs on In the Image Clothing Company, where you can find us, okay? So, thank you. Stick around. Stick around. I feel prompted, so I'm going to pick up this guitar. Don't know what that means. It's all freestyle anyway, so... Thank you. Yes, 24th of April, 2025. I'm the founder of all four sides of the company, In the Image Clothing Company. And I've been convicted beyond what I could even understand, and it's just been like a warm hug to really, really emphasize In the Image Clothing Company dogs. And I have. You can check out the past few episodes here of In the Image Clothing Company podcast, and yes. So, we will both see. It's going to be huge. Thank you.